Good morning. My name is Dave Brown. I'm a member of the Kootenai Board of Commissioners, Natural Resources Advisory Council. We work in conjunction with the committee. They come to us, we come to them to discuss and make recommendations on a variety of natural resource issues. So recently, I'd say over the last 3 or 4 months, this topic in front of you has been part of our discussion. And the culmination of that was this letter that I hope you have in front of you, because I'm not going to read it all word for word, but I'm just going to kind of review the highlights of it. And really, this is a letter doing two things. One is kind of commending the work that has been done, both in the Upper Basin, primarily in the Upper Basin, to deal with heavy metal issues up there. And well, some initial work that has been done in the Lower Basin. But I think the heart of the letter really is an encouragement by the Kootenai County Board of Commissioners to really get going on things in the Lower Basin. And if you reference the letters there, one of the first things, one bullet point there, and probably the most, I would say the most important part of this letter of encouragement would be the approval and completion of the Lower Basin waste containment area that has been previously reviewed and in consultation to get that thing decided on and completed. Much of the other work that likely will occur in the Lower Basin depends on having that waste containment area available to handle waste streams that are potentially developed as part of other actions. So that's certainly the number one issue here. The second point is implementing, and this is timely given our first presentation, implementation of on the NRCS stream bank stabilization methodology on eroding banks in the Dudley reach of the Coeur d'Alene River, generally defined as downstream of the I-90 bridge near Piptaldo to the Highway 3 bridge near Black Rock Lake. Just quickly, and I'm not an engineer, so I'll just make that disclaimer right off the bat. But the NRCS methodology of bank stabilization has been implemented on the Lower River, really, I think, since about the early 1990s. I just happened to be working for the NRCS here in Kootenai County at the time. I think the very first piece we did was on the Schlett property. I think that was something approaching a mile, I believe, 3/4 of a mile, to kind of get at your question of how much can be done single project. And that methodology is sort of this combination of rock and vegetation. And in this case, fairly small diameter rock. We actually used, I think, our engineering specs called what we call pit run, which really is an inexpensive rock that's left over when a lot of the larger rocks or rip rock projects is taken off. So you've got stuff that's, say, 6 inches in diameter and smaller. Tends to be well graded. That material was placed 3 feet below the summer water line, up to 3 feet above vertical feet. So horizontally, that's going to be dependent on the slope of the bank. But that's put down in conjunction with vegetation. And also the nice thing about this is it allowed us to work around existing vegetation as well. So that work can be seen. I know it's been since I left NRCS in Kootenai County right around 2000, and I know that work has continued on a number of projects NRCS funded in the Lower Basin since then, and I think that work has really held up. It's the test of time. It's really targeted primarily at boat wake erosion. I know it's explaining several flooding events. Proved pretty well intact, but it really gets to the goals as we talked about before. Really, our target there was both ways erosion. That's why we're putting that rock in that zone 3 feet above water line, 3 feet below to deal with that constant summer both here the road. So that was point number two. And then point number three, really carrying that same idea along, is implementing NRCS bank stabilization methodology on high priority eroding banks further down the river. Certainly those eroding banks are a significant contributor to both sediment and metal loading into the river. Getting those banks stabilized will go a long way into reducing that contamination stream. And then number four, initiate a pilot project in the Dudley Reach to quantify efficacy of armoring the riverbed. This is the riverbed now, not just the riverbanks, with coarse rock to control erosion actually on the bed of the stream, which is another issue. So that's something that I don't think really has been done yet in the lower river. And again, another source of contamination, an opportunity to see how that methodology can help in the overall effort to control sediment movement in that lower river. And then number five is more of a funding encouragement. Identify and develop plans for at least $1 million a year of implementation effort for these items 2 through 4 over the next 5 years. I know that NRCS has funding available that can help private landowners pay a part of the cost of doing this kind of work on their property. So there's limitations to that, both in terms of eligibility of any particular landowner being eligible for NRCS programs. And also sort of just the total amount of money that NRCS would have available to fund these. And I guess I'm just going to back up. I was a bureaucrat for a long time. We always threw out acronyms, and I've already made the mistake of not explaining what one of those is yet. I've been retired for a few years and I've already forgot that lesson. NRCS is the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They're an arm of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They have a local office here in Kootenai County. They work in cooperation both with the county commissioners as well as the Kootenai County Soil and Water Conservation District Board. They partner together to bring conservation on private lands. And so that brings me to the end of our encouragement from the Kootenai County Board of Commissioners, and happy to take any questions. Of course, done this today, and things that I can't answer. Hopefully, she'll be willing to help me out here. Answer some questions as well for you too. That open back. Julie, microphone.
I'm on.
So, good seeing you again, Dave.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that with us. I'm wondering, you suggested starting in the Dudley Reach, which is the most upstream reach in Kootenai County. Is that why you selected that reach for feelers as opposed to going further upstream?
There's probably people who maybe understand the prioritization maybe better than I do. My guess is always working upstream to downstream is a good idea. I know when I worked with NRCS, we worked with, whatever interested landowner would come through the door. Okay, without that, or yeah, we would work with, kind of whoever came through the door, because that's really the only option we had. But certainly working, upstream to downstream is always a good idea. You're not contaminating stuff, you're protecting stuff, and then moving your way downstream. And also, I think in this case, identifying those reaches that have some of the highest concentration of metals in those bank materials will also be a consideration. I think between those two things, I think that brought us to the reach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dave, good to see you. I didn't recognize you without the mustache. It's been a long time, my friend.
I got rid of about 10 years ago.
It's been a long time.
I went all white, I got rid.
That's good. Well, I just have a question in regards to the language in this item number 2. It says, implementing this NRCS bank state methodology on all eroding banks. We know that the technology works. We've seen it. From anybody that's been on the river, we've seen it work. We were involved with Schlepp's project together. I guess I'm just a little worried, given Ryan's presentation, to adopt one methodology as carte blanche, as the end all technology. I feel like there are other techniques that can be utilized. Have you guys talked about that in your committee?
I think this letter. I think this letter is a very high cut letter. I mean, I think the encouragement is if there's eroding banks out there, we need to treat them. We know the NRCS method is both effective and cost effective as well. But certainly if there's, as we go through the process, and again, thank you for the presentation ahead of here, as we go through that process of identifying, various site specific situations, yeah, there could well be things that come up that lend themselves to maybe a more intensive approach, a less intensive approach, some other some other technique that's more appropriate in one area versus the other. But again, I think we kind of took a high cut at this, knowing that a lot of those banks are very similar.